So now, let me now introduce our first speaker. It's Rick Hathaway. Really, let me take a breath, because it's really an honor for me to introduce Rick Hathaway. The best sentence I have found to introduce Rick is that he was there. He was there when the history occurs. He was there not only connecting people, he was there connecting presidents. He served in the White House Communications Agency for 14 years. He was telecom pioneer. Really, if he connected a car, connect a car, it's also very new for us. As you can see today, La Vanguardia is saying that, oh, the future is connected cars. This is nothing new, really, for Rick. He was connecting cars 25 years ago. After served with 4 different administrations, he didn't finish his service. He's permanently serving his clients and the world society as independent telecom consultant. He was president of the ECTC. I have the honor to serve as vice president under his leadership. He was there and now is here today with us to teach us how to face the current challenges. So all together, let's give a welcome. Rick, thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me acknowledge first also that when I was president of the Society of Telecommunication Consultants, we began our international outreach. Yes, we had a few Canadians, but it's hard to really consider them international when you're in the United States. Augustin was our first member, in the European theater. We now have members in France and Great Britain as well. So Augustin has been a very critical part of expanding the cooperation with international consultants. So let's see here. Introductions we've done. Panel presentation. We're each going to cover topics from a different point of view. We're all consultants, independent consultants. And again, when I refer to independent consultants, make it clear initially that we do not work for any of the vendors. We are totally vendor agnostic. We don't get paid by the vendors, no commissions, no finder's fees, no residuals. So that allows us to be that independent third party that can help clients make business decisions that are best in their interests. The typical ownership models that we usually describe when I approach a client who has probably just come back from a conference like the Mobile World Conference is to describe the traditional ownership, which again is an on-site PBX, an on-site piece of equipment. Cloud or hosted service, which will address some facets today, which the Mobile Congress addressed in very great detail. And kind of a hybrid mix of that managed services, which could be pretty much a mix of anything. That's why it's kind of listed third. Ownership models, this is kind of an eye chart for folks sitting in the audience. These slides can be made available if you want them. Typically, this slide here describes the different aspects of each ownership model. If an asset is premise-based, basically you bought it, you own it, you fix it, you upgrade it. It's entirely your responsibility. Hosted cloud is usually a multi-tenant system provided by a carrier. It's off-premise. It's not a dedicated asset. For that decrease in capital expense, you give up a little bit of control over the system. Upgrading the system is at the carrier's pace. Upgrading features at the carrier pace. The management efforts don't go away just because you've contracted with a carrier to be your telephony solution. And again, managed services could be on or off premises. Sometimes it's a dedicated asset, sometimes not. Very heavily contract dependent as far as terms and conditions for the services and support, which is a very important aspect of all of these things. The technology itself, many vendors have good technology. It's more important, more frequently now, who's going to put it in, who's going to support it. as to who the provider is. We have two legal experts here that will comment more on the contract aspect of this. What are the motivators that drive people to make different decisions? They generally break down into three areas: financial, tactical, and strategic. Financial being, again, reducing operating costs, control capital expenditures, maybe some staff implications. Tactical, become more productive, increasingly distributed workforce. That's been much more prevalent in the last 15 to 20 years. You find many companies that have very extensive work from home programs. Focus on the core business staff. It allows the in-house staff now to focus more on supporting the business requirements as opposed to spending their time supporting the technology. And again, one of the things I try to get across to my clients when we begin an engagement is, I want to learn how your business works. I already know how the technology works. The technology itself is not the goal. Technology is just a tool to help answer a business problem. Tools do two things. They do something for you and they do something to you. So it's up to the technology consultant to help balance that in favor of the client. Strategic, positioning organizations for long-term growth, prepared to support increasing number of complex applications, which again gets into that area of who's going to put it in, who's going to support it, because there are so many moving parts in modern telephony communications today. Unified communications is a great idea. It's a great function. It works very well, but there are a lot of moving parts. So that selection of your partner needs to be based on their knowledge of your business, their knowledge of your applications, and their ability to make that application fit your business model. Pros and cons of cloud services: it's predictable. It's an operational expense. Again, it allows your staff to focus more on business activities. You can accelerate deployment processes. Expanding the number of ports, number of stations in a cloud application is much easier, much quicker than bringing in more cards, bringing in more shelves, bringing in more servers into your enterprise. Some of the negatives about it: there's skepticism about the cost savings, because that's usually what carriers will front their advertising with. It costs less. Costs less and does more. That's usually what the opening line is. Failure to include all cost elements in the analysis. Questions about legal and regulatory compliance. Lack of industry standards. There are some standards that carriers adhere to, just like equipment manufacturers. How many here remember QSIG? Right? Yeah. No manufacturer ever complied with all 26 of the QSIG standards. They all complied with a subset of their own choosing. The last couple, resistance from internal staff. It's very frequent when I run into engagements when cloud services are brought into the organization, where the existing telecommunications staff begins now to look over their shoulder to say, is my job going away? So there's always some resistance there. Checklist factors. Again, the selection is as much of a business decision as it is technical. It's not enough, if there are technology consultants in the audience here, it's not enough to just be a technologist. You have to be a business analyst as well. You have to know the technology enough to be able to translate that technology to people who aren't technologists, people that are going to use these as tools to help solve a business problem. Because nobody has the budget to buy technology just because they like technology. If it doesn't serve a purpose, if it doesn't answer a question, if it doesn't fit into your 1, 3, or 5-year business plan, then you really need to question why you're doing that transaction. Again, these are just tools to help you do a job. Be realistic about the goals and objectives. Understand your own strategies. Understand your own unified communication strategies, and know your candidate providers. Just like you would interview a person that you are going to hire, you interview the carriers. You ask, you make sure that they know your business. It's not good enough that a carrier or a particular dealer be very familiar with hospitals if your business is manufacturing. They need to know your business model to make that right fit, and use secondary references. That's a tool that I've used in my interviewing for quite a number of years. If you give me a reference, you're naturally going to give me somebody who's going to say good things about you. Well, I'm going to ask them, well, who else knows this person, to find out and then broaden that view of what your performance is likely to be. Common blockers, what to find out, what to do. These are generally the 10 points that we'll address here in different sequences. But these are generally the points that we try to get clients to consider. Determine the business needs first, because again, these are just tools. Nobody buys technology just because technology is neat. It's got to serve a business purpose. It's got to help your bottom line. Don't assume that your infrastructure is ready. It's amazing when I interview CIOs and they tell me, well, sure, we can put in this voice over IP system with unified communications, and they're still on network hubs. They're not even on switches yet. Line of business leaders, it's not an IT decision anymore. Years ago, when we got into those conference room tables, it was the CIO sitting at the head of the table. Now that's not the case. They're at the table, but those line of business leaders are there too. They're getting into that decision process because they realize how important communications is to the success of the business. Vendor neutral RFP and an objective evaluation process. Yeah, this is your first line of defense when you go out to do a procurement of any kind. Once that contract is signed, your flexibility becomes very limited. Remember those one-off needs? Yeah, as long as I've been in the business, and as long as I probably will still be in the business, analog will probably still be there. IP communications is great, mobile is great, unified communications is great, but what about that fax machine? What about that elevator phone? Remember those needs that aren't quite so obvious. I've got some slides on initial price for a long-term TCO, total cost of ownership. Always a struggle between the budgeting people. Our attorneys will address the ones in red. They told me to do them in red because they're really important. And then training. Don't forget training. I did a hospital client once where it was 3,000 station hospital, 30% of the people showed up for training. That Monday morning after cutover was a disaster. The second hospital in that same organization, 85% of the people showed up for training. So don't cut short the training on your new systems. Total cost of ownership, again, it's easy to say, especially in tight budget times, but you got to do the math. And this is where, again, it's not good enough to just be technology consultants. You need to be business consultants as well. You need to consider all the costs. You need to throw in every cost that you know. You need to look at your own corporate life cycle for your own equipment replacement cycle, 7, 10, 12 years, whatever that is, and expect your numbers to be challenged. Anytime you put a number on the board in a meeting, somebody's going to challenge it. Your boss, the CFO, somebody is going to challenge. Certainly the vendors are going to challenge your numbers. And again, the elements that typically are included are listed there. And again, I see some of you taking pictures of these slides. These can be made available to you, after the presentation. It's not good enough. Again, just to throw a spreadsheet up. Most people, if you throw something like that up from them, even with a summary, their eyes will kind of glaze over and they won't understand. So you need to be able to present that in different formats to show people physically where that break-even point is between expense, between the different options. This was a first city government. We determined that, again, 4.5-year break-even point just on terms of annual cash flow. For this particular client, this wasn't good enough. They wanted to see cumulative cost roll-ups. So again, you need to be as much of a business analyst as a technologist. This particular client also wanted to know the present value of the sum of payments over 12 years. Fortunately, my educational background is in accounting, so I do quite a bit of this kind of financial calculations as part of the technology consulting. Pretty much that's it for my portion. I'll hand it off to George.
Thank you very much.
Yep, thank you.